Hi, this is Jeff Etienne, and I'm giving you my video presentation this week on my reflection for week 4. Some of the areas I want to focus in on is talked a little bit earlier about the interview process last week and how that would tie into staff development. Staff development's been a high focus of mine for quite a long time, having been a former staff development chair. And I'm going to kind of tie those two concepts together from the reading that I talked about and some of my own thoughts and research. But I'd just like to open up first on the financial part that we looked at and reviewing the MDE website. And it's kind of interesting as I reflected back on my discussion board postings was about our trying to remember the word, our compensatory money, and also our funding for special education. My wife, as I mentioned before, was a school board member, and in her notes from our superintendent, the governor's proposal for compensatory funding is something that he thinks will positively impact our school district with some more money on how we'll change that, and also to fund special education at a higher funding level. He thinks will make a big difference for us too. And so I'm kind of excited about that opportunity and learning about those funding aspects. It's been a bit of a challenge to the website. I found access to all the information, but understanding how all the formulations, the compensatory funding formulations, have been kind of complicated for me to understand. But what I'd like to move on to is basically the interview process we talked about last week and how it would tie into hiring teachers and then developing the teachers that you hire. As I said in my discussion board post last week, I like the concept of the open-ended interview because in research that I've done previously in other classes, I've kind of focused in on common traits of effective teachers, and I think there's a lot of ways in the open-ended interview that if you're phrasing open-ended questions correctly and allowing to get to know the teacher, one of the big aspects of common traits of effective teachers has been their ability to communicate, to have personality, and to model different things. And through this open-ended interviewing process, you can have a chance to observe some of those traits to see how they function within those teachers. And that's something I think is important to do, and I think as you move on, we have, I've heard over the years through reading and research that to get, keep, and advance in the job, research that I read from Harvard said about 20% of technical skills and knowledge is the part that helps you advance, keep, and get a job. About 80% are your people skills, your communication skills, your relationship skills, and those are very positive things that a successful teacher needs to have. Some of the other common traits listed are fairness, positive attitude, preparedness, a personal touch, sense of humor, creativity, a willingness to admit mistakes, being forgiving, show respect, have high expectations, and compassion, a sense of belonging. And these are all kind of traits that tie into the professional learning communities that we have talked about also for our PLCs. And one of the things I developed in our supervision class was the observation trait, and I think as you interview people through the process and you go into professional development, splitting up into what I saw as 5 core areas was the passion for the profession and students, instructional and managerial, and that's kind of the technical skills and knowledge, communication, interpersonal skills, artistry of teaching, and continuous professional growth and reflection. And as we talked about our professional learning communities and groups, that reflection part and continuous professional growth is a very important aspect. One thing in the reading this week, as we talked about placement and induction, and I'm going to kind of read this, they said the placement of employees within the school system is the responsibility of the superintendent. They said in all but the very smallest districts, a new employee should not be told that he or she has been hired for a particular job in a specific school or building. I was kind of shocked by reading this example because I know in my 28 years in Richfield, basically when we hire people, there's a specific subject area posting and usually a specific grade level and building area and specific classes that you'll teach in that subject area, especially if you're a secondary teacher. And that part was kind of shocking to me in the placement and induction. And I think as you go out to recruit and interview teachers for certain levels, that it's important that you find that they have the passions for that student at that grade level and that subject matter. And then as you advance through the interview process, through checking out credentials and references, you can find out a little bit more about their instructional know-how, their managerial experience, and things like that. But in the process of sitting down face-to-face is where you find out some of these communication, interpersonal skills, and can talk about the artistry of teaching, which I refer to as kind of their creative aspect and their use of repertoires of response, their modeling instruction, and alternating different demonstrations with student initiations. One of the examples in my observations is that students are involved in authentic learning activity, participating with interactive questioning and discussions. I think through your open-ended interview, you can talk with teachers about that aspect, and that can really help them grow in that, or you can have a chance to find out if they grow in that area and if they're going to have some of those effective traits and qualities that they need to have. And as you tie this into professional growth, the concept of the professional learning community, I think, is tremendous. I wish we had that in our school district, but we don't. And I think the aspect of continuous professional growth, and especially as we talk about that in staff development, some of the key points mentioned in Rebor's reading this week, the learning rather than teaching, collaborating, viewing all members of the community as learners, and the practicing self-accountability. I think those are traits of successful teachers, and if you get successful teachers involved in learning communities, you're modeling and practicing those traits all the time. And then I also believe as you move into types of staff development, as in the reading this week, there's instructional skills, management skills, then you hit the human relation abilities. And I think those are probably what really makes up 80% of the successful teacher. And one of the challenges in professional growth and staff development is finding the trainings and the ability to do that. There's lots of training you can get in staff development that's centered around the what they call the instructional skills, the management skills, content and curriculum. A comment I heard a long time ago by a former superintendent in our district that created a lot of angst within our teachers union, that it's not that important who the person is teaching it. If you have the right curriculum and the right program, the students will be successful. And I think all the research that I've done over the last year or so within this class has proved that really the teacher is the person that can make the largest impact. It is important to have the right curriculum and program. But developing some of these key traits that are common traits of successful teachers, I think, is very, very important. And tying that into your professional development is an aspect that if I were an administrator, I've already been a staff development chair, and I really try to do stuff to focus on that. And one of my long-term goals is, as I move into my later years in teaching when I retire, is to go out and share some of these concepts, both with teachers and students, that are common effective traits, helping them develop their own passion and purpose to make sure that people are placed and are pursuing the proper career goals, the proper personal life goals that students may have or teachers. Because I'll close with one common trait that I think is, as I've told when I've done some of my presentation with teachers, there's somewhere in your core sense of values. If you as a teacher do not have making a difference in somebody's life as a core value within your own personal life, as a purpose and a mission, you're going to have a hard time being very satisfied as a teacher, as an educator, and the profession will become very frustrating. And that's a big part that you have to start with, is making a difference. And the second part is probably the largest part the teachers have, they say common trait, is caring for students. And when you have that core passion for making a difference in students' lives, then that part of caring for students will really carry over to make you successful in the classroom. Along with those same traits as an administrator, if you have that core passion making a difference for the students and the teachers within your building and your community, then that sense of caring and that common purpose that you're all in will really show up, and I think you'll have the chance to be a very powerful and effective leader. So with that, I'll close this week's reflection. Thank you.